Welcome to our latest installment of Fun with FLOTUS. If you were with us last month, we talked about the first woman to run for president. Before women even had the right to vote, Victoria Woodhull ran for president. And so today, we're down here in our Breaking the Glass Ceiling exhibition to talk about the first African American woman who not only ran for president, but she was the first African American woman in Congress. And when she joined the ranks of Congress, there was not one person who looked like her. She was surrounded by white men. And she has this great phrase that if someone won't give you a seat at the table, you pull up your own chair. And she created all sorts of space for people that look like her by starting the Congressional Black Caucus. And here, if you take a look, you can see some posters and buttons that represent her. So today, we're actually going to talk about verbs. Verbs are action words, right? So Shirley was reaching, she was changing, she was unbossed and unbought. And so today, for Fun with FLOTUS, we're going to read this really great new book called Shirley Chisholm is a Verb. So are you ready to get started and open it up and read? Let's head upstairs and do it. Here's our story today. Shirley Chisholm is a Verb, written by Veronica Chambers and illustrated by Rochelle Baker. And one thing I love about this book is the illustrations. I really love Shirley's cool clothes. They really put you in that time period that she lived. Some words, when they connect with the right people, become almost like potions or spells. These words become magical. That's the way it was with Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm and verbs. She understood almost intuitively how and why verbs are not just words about being, but doing. Verbs are words that move the world forward. Shirley's family understood all about moving. Her mother was from Barbados, an island in the Caribbean. Her father was from Guyana, a country in South America. They moved to New York City where Shirley was born. When Shirley was 3, her mother sent her and her sisters to Barbados so their parents could work more hours. Her mother cleaned houses and office buildings. Her father worked in a factory. They worked all day and all night because they dreamed of buying a home for their family in the United States. In Barbados, surrounded by her grandmother, aunts, and uncles, little Shirley worked hard too. Her classroom was noisy, and their 3 teachers that shared the room needed to project to be heard above all the passionate students. But her teachers taught Shirley how to speak up, and they helped her understand the power of words. Later, she would say, "If I speak and read and write easily, that early education is the cause." When she was 9, Shirley and her sisters moved back from Barbados to Brooklyn. Everything in Brooklyn was different, and Shirley missed the warm island weather. But Shirley loved indoor activities like going to the movies and reading. Shirley was a voracious reader, much like her father. Shirley was also a dedicated student at her high school in Brooklyn. She was the vice president of the Junior Arista Honor Society and graduated with a Medal of Excellence in French. She earned scholarships to both Vassar and Oberlin colleges, but her parents could not afford the room and board. Shirley decided to go to Brooklyn College instead and live at home in the brownstone her parents were ultimately able to buy through their hard work. In college, Shirley decided to pursue a career in education. She became a nursery school teacher and then earned her master's degree. Completing her education was hard work, but it paid off. She directed daycare centers and became a consultant to the city on early education. She helped implement and organize a program called Head Start, which helps 3- and 4-year-olds get ready for kindergarten. But Shirley wanted to help even more people. She believed that service to others is the rent you pay for your room on earth, which is another way to say that she wanted to use her verbs and improve the lives of as many people as she could, just like her parents and her teachers had improved her own. She decided to go into politics. She ran for and won a seat on the New York State Assembly. The Assembly makes decisions for all people all over the state of New York. She was one of the first people to argue that New York State literacy tests not be conducted only in English. New York was home to people from all over the world. Shirley thought it was important to honor the native languages of all the state's citizens. For her work in the New York State government, she was awarded Salute to Woman Doers Award. She was always a doer. Then Shirley ran for the United States Congress, the part of the government that makes decisions for people all over the country. It was a race few thought she could win, but Shirley believed if your heart told you it was the right thing to do, you should always listen. She knew she could only fail if she didn't try. She campaigned, meaning that she encouraged people to vote for her. Her slogan was unbought and unbossed. She wanted the people to know that she would never choose money or power over what was important to them. She campaigned both English and Spanish because she wanted as many people as possible to understand her message. In her speeches, she called herself Fighting Shirley Chisholm because she wanted voters to know that she wasn't afraid to stand up for what she believed in. The people of Brooklyn chose Shirley to represent them. She became the first Black woman ever elected to Congress. Shirley traveled to Washington, D.C. There wasn't a single person who looked like her. It was a lonely time, being the first and only often is. But Shirley Chisholm wouldn't give up. She thought of all the people back in Brooklyn who had voted for her. Shirley felt forever linked to them. Shirley's first assignment in Congress was the House Agriculture Committee, a group of people who oversee the farmlands of America. Shirley was disappointed. She came from a big city. How would working with farms help the people in Brooklyn who voted for her? She shared this question with her friend. He encouraged her to use the position on the committee to help feed the hungry all over, including her beloved Brooklyn. Shirley helped to initiate a program called WIC, which assists women, infants, and children in need of food. Shirley also helped create the National School Lunch Program, but she didn't decide the menus. So if you don't like your lunch, please don't blame her. Because of her hard work, she eventually earned her dream job helping students and workers through the Education and Labor Committee. Shirley said, "You don't make progress by standing on the sidelines, whimpering and complaining." She said, "If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair." And Shirley wasn't just concerned about getting a seat at the table for herself. She never wanted to be the one and only. She helped create the Congressional Black Caucus so more African Americans could be elected to serve in Washington, D.C. She wanted Congress to look like the America that had elected her. Not everyone in Washington applauded Shirley's wins. She was always more interested in serving people than in making laws that helped big business. The men on Capitol Hill cared more and more about power and money and said, "Go home, Shirley Chisholm." She replied, "I'm fighting Shirley Chisholm. You can't wish me away. You just can't." She remembered the impassioned teachers and her hardworking parents, and it gave her the spirit and spunk to challenge the age-old traditions. She said, "I'm not afraid of anything or anybody." Shirley was so unafraid that in 1972, after 4 years in Congress, she decided to run for president. Before a large crowd of people, she announced, "I stand before you today as a candidate for the presidency of the United States of America." She was the first Black person and the first woman to make a serious bid for the presidency. She said, "I am not the candidate for Black people, although I am Black and proud. I am not the candidate of the women's movement of this country, although I am a woman and I am equally proud of that. I am the candidate of the people of America." Shirley crisscrossed the nation giving speeches, debating candidates on television, and registering voters. She needed to convince the Democratic Party that she would be the best candidate for president. People had called Shirley Chisholm many things before, but now they said she was Black, beautiful, brave, brainy, bright, believable. Some of the other candidates were angry that Shirley was taking votes away from them, but Shirley knew how to hold her ground. She said, "Excuse me, I have a right to be here. Pay attention, I've got something to say. Listen, I've got a job to do and I intend to do it." When people tried to silence her, Shirley spoke louder. When the media ignored her, Shirley protested vigorously. When other politicians tried to bully her, Shirley stood stronger. When her opponents said hurtful things, Shirley smiled wider. Then Shirley heard that the Democrats had decided that she would not be their presidential candidate. Shirley was disappointed but not discouraged. Shirley realized that just because she didn't win, it didn't mean that she lost. During her presidential bid, she had gained more delegates than many in the party expected. With each delegate that voted for her, she put a crack in the ceiling that separated women and men of color from the highest seat in the nation, the presidency. Some races are relays. We only need to run as far and as fast as we can. Shirley's verbs, her words, and her actions planted the seeds of possibility for others. 12 years later, Geraldine Ferraro would crack the ceiling further when she gained the Democratic nomination for vice president. 25 years after that, President Barack Obama would ascend all the way to the White House. 7 years later, Hillary Rodham Clinton would put 18 million cracks in that ceiling when the Democrats nominated her for president. And then in 2018, a record-breaking 131 women were elected to Congress. It's a number that would have made Shirley beam. Part of that congressional class of 2018 was a young woman named Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Like Shirley, she was also known as a congresswoman from New York. Like Shirley, Alexandria did things her way. She prioritized the people who had elected her and put their concerns first. Shirley Chisholm inspired her. On her first day in Congress, Alexandria said, quote, "From suffragettes to Shirley Chisholm, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the mothers of the movement." She informed the people in Washington that in the spirit of Shirley, she was fighting Alexandria, and they couldn't just wish her away, they couldn't. Shirley Chisholm once said, "The next time a woman of whatever color or a dark-skinned person of whatever sex aspires to be president, the way should be a little smoother because I helped pave it." It was always her intention to throw the door of government wide open, and she did. When Shirley retired from Congress after serving 7 consecutive terms in office, she said she wanted to be known for her courage to stand up for herself and the people who had elected her. She said, "I'd like them to say that Shirley Chisholm had guts." In 2015, President Barack Obama awarded Chisholm the Medal of Freedom. Shirley's great-nephew accepted the award on her behalf. Speaking of her service to the nation and how tireless she was in her quest, President Obama said, There are people in our country's history who don't look left or right. They look straight ahead. Shirley Chisholm was one of those people. Shirley Chisholm accomplished so much because she chose her verbs carefully. Learn, negotiate, listen, stand, champion, invite, debate, inspire, speak, represent. It's your turn now. What verbs will you choose? That's our story for today. Shirley Chisholm is a verb. So what verbs represent you? You can go and click on our activity pack for today's candidate for president, Shirley Chisholm, and you can do all sorts of activities, from designing your own school lunch to creating your own verbs to cracking your own glass ceiling. So we hope you enjoyed today's installment of Fun with FLOTUS, and please share any of your creations or ideas or questions with us. We love to hear from you, and until then, we will see you next time.